Yo, we're started up. Give me a second. Sitting out the chairs right now. Just a few more people here to get this out too. How we doing? It's Thursday, the 6th, July. All right, last one for now. Think by now you know, like that's like my favorite part of this whole beat. That like, y'all know what it is. Come on. What's happening, guys? All right, we are back today, episode number 4. Hope you guys are having a great 4th of July week. I know some of you guys would like keep the party going like all week long, and a couple of you guys like woke up on Wednesday and said I got to get back to work. So if that's you, keep working. If it's not, be safe. Now, let's go ahead and jump into today's talk, guys. Here's the deal. I actually got a question, and I implore all of you guys to do this. If you haven't yet, check out the YouTube videos, drop a comment, drop a question. But the question we got from episode number 1, first one out the break, and had a great brother actually know him. He posted, and he wanted to know a couple specific things. He says, why should we have an identity? And then who defines it? And then he just kind of gave me the what are my roles? And I didn't know how that started. And I wanted to, say, hey, look, we're talking about defining your roles right now. And I wanted to take today to go ahead and address that because I don't want to let too much time get past that. So again, comment, drop a post. I'm listening. I'm watching. I want more from you guys. So in episode number 1, when we really just kind of discussed what is this going to be about, we're just going to talk about recovery and addictions, or this is going to be about personal development and habits. And a big part of that was understanding how that applies to like our manhood, which is like one of the beginning parts of our identity. Right? Now, when we talk about our identity, like if us just being men real quick, right? I mean, put all the normal kind of problems aside, the whole nine. When it comes to men and we got to figure out what our identity is, we normally look at one of two things. Like it kind of breaks down a little bit like this. Like you'll have roles on one end, and listen, don't yell at me. My daughter already did. She was like, Dad, I saw your video where you was writing backwards, and listen, every device won't let me flip the screen. So just kind of hang in there with me, all right? But we got roles, and then we're going to have like what I call like your big picture. Like big picture, there's some things that men are like expected to be as part of their identity. And on top of that, they also get into these certain types of roles that we're supposed to have, right? So when we talk about men and our identity, I want you all to have a second to kind of think about it, because for me, here's what I knew about being a man. And this is why it's important for you to understand what your identity is versus or outside of what these labels and these roles are that we're going to have. And I'm kind of jumping ahead right now about who defines it. Right? You see, unfortunately, we're normally given the big picture and we're given roles. So you got to think about that for a minute. And if your identity is kind of based on big picture, when I talk about big picture, I mean like protector, provider. Those are like the big picture kind of things, right? Like above all, you're going to be able to make sure you do this kind of deal. But if someone's telling you what that is, and if someone is telling you what roles you have to fulfill, then who decided on what your identity was going to be? Someone else, not you. The one person that has to carry this out, that has to live this out, right? Normally we're the person that has the least involvement as to what our identity is going to be until we reach that point where it's like, damn, what is my identity? You see, for me, aside from like being a provider, and please know, like if my wife was here, she'd give me a side eye. She's like, you wasn't always that great provider, which is true. I mean, when you're dealing with different addictions and you're focused right here on a lot of the roles, you know, it's just because we do some of these things doesn't mean that we're great at it. Right? I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, I was also a protector, but it doesn't mean that I was great at it. Right? And there's no shame in that. Like, I have to be able to know that to be able to say, okay, if I wasn't great, what would help me to be great if that's what I want to use as my identity? Now, for me, here's what I knew growing up was that I had to own a role and smash it, or at least give the image like I smashed it. And that was what my identity was really about. Like, even forget the big picture parts. I just wanted to make sure I accomplished certain roles, certain benchmarks that helped me to be able to say, hey, moving forward, this is what makes George Morning a man. And some of those things was like what? Let's say education. More so, even outside of just really saying education, it was about college. Gotta go to college. Gotta go to college. Even for me growing up, it wasn't about just going to college. It was like a certain college. You guys will hear me talk about it. I love it. But still, like, that was part of it. Like, I gotta go to HU. Gotta get to Howard University. Right? That was like one of the notches that I had in terms of what qualifies George to be a man. Right? Then what comes up next? So it might even be a little bit before that, but somewhere in that, what? You gotta be an employee. Which I think is so freaking crazy that we say this. Like, how we discuss this to children, to men, to boys and girls. Doesn't matter. Think about that for a minute. Like, we never say go and be an employee. What we do say is that you gotta go get a job. Like, you got to be able to provide. And 9 times out of 10, that means what? Go out and get a job. Now, what is amazing about that, and I won't spend too much time here because, you know, we've got some more points, other parts we're going to talk about today. But we get talked about so much about getting the job and what we're doing is becoming an employee that we spend so many years stuck on how to work for someone else. Like, I don't know if that really hits you guys a lot. And this isn't criticizing anybody that has a 9 to 5 or if you got a boss and you love your job. But I mean, think just from the standpoint of how you are beginning to create your own identity as you get older. Everybody can't make those leaps that say, screw what I was told. I'm going to forge my own path. That's why this show is here right now, because I didn't have that, right? But we're told for like years and decades, like, go work for someone else. It gets shaped in a whole bunch of other different ways. Go get a check, go provide, suck it up, get some experience. We hear all those different things. What it really comes down to is that we're saying is that I need you to go get a check because you did something for someone else. Let's keep it moving. What else comes in? What were the other roles? Of course, now, if I'm going to be a man, like, it's one thing to me to kind of be educated, or it's another thing to say that I can be employed, right? Even when I lost jobs all the time, my friends always comment like, wow, George, you always stayed with a job. Now, what was the other part? Family, right? Like husband, dad, right? I mean, again, these are just things for me. Like, these are things that the roles of being an employee, of being a college graduate, of being a husband, of being a dad, right? What else was there? Like, I don't know how we can even almost put this as a label sometimes. But like, kind of being that social guy, the man about town, all those different things. You see, as far as being a man was concerned and me having and understanding what George's identity was, as long as I was doing these roles, I had it made. Like, smooth sailing, good to go. Here's the problem, and here's why we have to know what our identity is, and here's why we have to be the ones to define it. right? Plain and simple, because when everything came like kind of crashing down on me, as I said, you guys heard me talk about that holy shit moment, right? Well, when that happened with me, it didn't matter. Like things like my education, that meant nothing. Meant nothing. Didn't keep the things around me secure. Me being an employee, always being able to go out here and do a good job for someone else and work really hard for that didn't mean shit. You see, then I looked up one day and my wife had left with my 2 youngest kids. So it's not like I can go around screaming and beating my chest about how great of a dad I am and how great of a husband I was at that time. Right? And then if none of that looks good, like if all the imagery that I had about myself doesn't apply anymore, you don't see me going to work, you don't see me being a husband, you don't see me being a dad, well then how, I'm not that social man on the town. Like now I'm social for the wrong reasons, or people want to know me for the wrong reasons. Like what happened? You know, where is she at? What happened to your kids? What happened to your job? What happened to the car? Right? All of a sudden that kind of went away. And then that's when I hit and I had to really ask myself, well, wow, what is my identity? Because I got to tell you, when all these things go away, and I'm talking like after, you know, I go through this like recovery period, right? Like I still didn't have these things. Like I still had education, but it didn't make it a difference. Like I was still demoted from my job. Wife and kids was still gone. My social circle had been like shrunk down, like from a grapefruit to a pea, if you will. I mean, like none of these had changed just because all of a sudden George was done with an addiction or a problem. You see, at the end of the day, George still felt like crap. Loser. Worthless. Like, I can probably go on and on. I mean, I'm a Christian as well. Like, even the spiritual part of me. That was smashed. Like, it was like, wow, I'm not even worthy in these areas right now. And that's why it's important. And at that moment, I realized, like, if all I am now, like, if none of this matters, and I look up and all I'm feeling about myself is that I'm crap and, you know, I'm still a loser. And I'm all like, if that's what my identity was at that point in time, and I'm still not dealing with an addiction, then what's really going on? So let's get back to it here. We'll make this so bloom and gloom, which is so crazy because it's like middle of summer. It's like sunny all week long. And like today I got clouds out and everything, but you know, it's how it goes. So here's what George had to do. And this is how I'm going to ask you all to do, because number one, we have to have the identity because that allows you to know exactly who you are within a world that is designed to give you instructions on what to be. And let's just face it, that doesn't always work for everyone. Everybody can't be a yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am kind of guy. And I accept most of you all don't. A lot of you all do that within your roles. And we allow that to permeate into who we exactly are as an individual. Like you might be in the military, might be a police officer, you might play a particular sport where there's a lot of structure involved in terms of what you got to do. That doesn't need to be the definition of who you are. Right? Here's the next reason why it's important to understand your roles versus your identity. Because here's the deal. Like when you're these different roles, right? And let's go through it again. Your dad, your husband, you're a worker. What else? Say fun guy. Right? Now, let's just be realistic for a minute. If we're going to operate off of roles, like how often do you work? Seriously. If you're a worker and you're an employee, then that means you're probably putting in, on average, let's just say, hypothetically, we count even your lunch break and the times you goof off a little bit. Don't worry, I did the same thing. But let's just say it's 8 hours. Right? So before that 8 hours, you're not a worker, which means that whatever way you operated as a worker, like if you're the walk around with smiles all the time at work kind of guy, if you're the yes man at work all the time, if you're the hard ass at work all the time, if you're operating just within your roles, then you're probably not being that before or after, or you're in some sort of prep and come out of zone. Right? Like I used to do sales. Right? And forget about the income of it. Like it was probably, not only did I learn a lot from it, But when I understood how it impacted me in roles, and I'm here, I'm talking 8 hours, but for me, it's more like 10, 12 hours, almost 6, 7 days a week. That's where I found myself. I'm either completely different than how I am at work, or I'm finding myself having to build myself up for what I got to do at the job and then needing time to come down after work. Same thing with being a husband. And let's just be honest, because for me, doing sales and I'm hardly around the house, I had to be a husband for about maybe an hour and a half a day. Again, now I'm talking about roles. See, when I was so fixed on my roles, I wasn't the guy that was answering the phone when I was at work to talk to my wife. I was the guy that was like, what are you doing? How are you bugging me? I'm at work, trying to make money. You got all day to call me. Why are you bothering me right now? Right? I wasn't letting my roles overlap. I'll be a husband when I'm at home to be a husband. It's probably maybe the one thing I did do was I let dad kind of seep in a couple areas. But I mean, even then, my kids knew that if I had to leave work because I had to deal with something at school, it was not going to be a great day. Like you come in the middle of that process for me. Right? Or even when I'm with my wife, my kids knew if something happened that interferes with that, if something happens that's going to take me away from hanging out with the fellas or doing something on my own time, it was not a pretty thing. You're going to force me to have one role interact with another role. Now, here's what's key about this, okay? I'm not upset about the roles. Like, I don't want you guys to really hear this. It's not so much that you can't have roles. They help us move faster. It's all part of habit land. You know what to do at work. You know what to do at home. You know what to do as a dad. You know what to do with your boys. All that is great, fine, and dandy. Here's the problem, though, is that when you have to be a completely different person just to fulfill your roles. That's the biggest problem, is that when you got to be completely different just to fulfill a particular role. So that now I'm dad, and as a dad, I can't be the same as when I'm a husband or when I'm at work. And you know what? I'm at work. So look, honey, I can't talk to you because if I talk to you on the phone, then I got to switch into being a husband right now. Right? And again, this is why it's so key to understand the difference in your identity versus your roles. The way this is supposed to operate for us is that our identity powers every last one of our roles. Our roles are essentially nothing more than a conduit for our identity to be best expressed. I want to repeat that for you. All your roles is just a way for your identity to be best shown. So when it came to employment, right? I mean, this is where a lot of us probably messed up because we were just told to go out here and get the job. Forget about even the whole working for someone part. Just go get a job. Nobody says, look, well, what are you talented in? What are you skilled in? Oh, you don't have a job. Get a job. This isn't about right or wrong, but we do got to know what the setup's going to look like. And we're going to be able to deal with this on the back end. So we got to know either one or two things. Either A, we got to start changing the script, especially us as men. We're talking to a younger generation about them going to work. I finally had to suck it up myself talking to my 17-year-old, right? He's getting ready for college right now. And there's a part of me in my head that's like, all right, boom. So you need to be in like school of business, school of engineering, architect, sciences. I'm thinking about where you got to go to masters and what's going to get you the most amount of money, the whole nine. And when I finally had a chance to talk to this, to talk to my man and make sure, had a little buzz here, sorry. But had a chance to talk to him. You know what it was for him? Culinary arts. I had to finally suck that up. Like, that's how your best expression that you see right now when it comes to a profession is going to be in culinary arts. And I'm going to accept that. What was the other option? Me force him into doing something where he can't let the best part of him show. So then he's waking up every day dreading to go into work and can't wait until the clock goes out to leave work. No. We got to know how we can best magnify who we already are through what it is that we fulfill and do. That's about being transparent. That's about having a level of oneness, a level of wholeness. When I know that I don't got to have a conversation different with my wife than what I'm going to have with my children. The subject matter might be completely different. That might be true. The subject matter of what I'm going to talk about at work when I'm talking to you guys versus what I'm talking about with my wife might be completely different. But who I am and communicating that, who you need to be, and going through each and every one of these roles, well, that's about your identity. So again, back to the second question, who defines it? You define it. How do we go out and redefine our identity if we've been living this whole time off of the roles in the big picture? I mean, let's just be honest. We're all here initially for a specific reason. Like if you get made it to feed the right wolf, I understand why you're here. Right? The reality of it is that that's the symptom about why you're really here. The truth of the matter is that that's more so the one avenue you said that, damn it, I have an identity. That sounds kind of crazy to people watching this right now because you're like, oh man, your identity just wrapped up in what? Sex and porn and stuff then? Is that what you're saying? No, it's not it at all. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But somehow in that process, you said a part of you is being magnified here. Like there's some authority being shown here. There's some, even for me, it was about the level of significance, the relevance that I felt that I had in these moments. Right? All those pieces, that I wanted to have for my identity, the part of feeling like I was now like this centerpiece, if you will. So let's keep this rocking and rolling. We talked about your identity. How do we define it? So now here's what I want to ask you guys to go through and do when you start looking at how you're going to begin defining your identity. The first thing I want you guys to do as you're defining your identity is that I want you to, one, realize what the roles are. And then I'm going to ask you all to do what I ask a lot of my guys to do. I want you to imagine that you're out having a great meal. You're sitting down with, your family. You're sitting out here with your wife and your kids, and you maybe have a couple people from your job that are all enjoying dinner with you. Whatever you feel these roles are, they're all having a great night with you in this restaurant. And then someone comes in and shoots up the joint. You duck. Shooting stops. You come up. Everything around you, all these roles, they're now dead. They're gone. And it sounds pretty brutal to be able to say that. I'm like, man, what are you talking about? I got to imagine life without my wife. Imagine life without my kids. Well, to a certain degree, that is what I'm saying, because it's at that moment you get a chance to decide who exactly you are. It's almost like when you hear that story about how the guy who goes out here and he does the whole 4-year, 8-year academic program and works this wonderful, great job. And then he finds out mom's died. And at that moment, he now says, you know what? I'm going to finally live my life. I don't got to live it for mom anymore. I'm going to live my life right now. We're talking about the exact same thing. Because then you no longer had to fulfill that role. It's like looking at the guy that's 80 years old driving around in a Corvette in the fast lane. It's brand new. He's doing like 25 miles an hour. He finally got to a point when he was like, you know what? I don't got to live up to this particular role. That conservative, I can let loose right now. It's part of where your identity is. And somewhere along the lines, we were told that we had to stifle that. So when you go back to that level of guided imagery and you're sitting there and everything around you is all of a sudden just gone. Like you can't wake up saying, I'm going to go to work for my wife and my kids because they're now gone right now. You can't say, how you're doing this for this civic group right now. You got to show up and be accountable for this civic group right now that you're so endeared to because now they're gone. Now the question says, who am I still? And that was probably the hardest question for me. Not so much because I had to deal with the loss of those individuals and these people, but because now I had to finally say, shit, that's a good question. Who the hell am I? I'm not dad. I'm not husband. I'm not great salesman. I'm not wonderful son and decent brother and good, reliable friend anymore. Who am I? Then it's okay. I'm creative. All right. I'm a powerful individual, vocal. Okay. See, all these things transcend no matter what my roles are. Right. I'm considerate. And you want to go down the line. You see, what makes you a great husband? What makes you a great dad? What about you makes you a great worker? Like, what specifically about you? Not what you do well that's assigned to you, if that makes sense. But you got to get to your identity. And once you figure out what your identity is, your only job is to say, now, within each one of my roles, what is the number one way that I'm looking to push this identity out? How am I flushing this out? Last but not least, your roles. And again, we kind of touched on that, right? You know, what are my roles? And I'm assuming that my brother meant, you know, who defines my roles, right? And I got to tell you, that's probably, you know, the not necessarily the topic of the hour, but because of where we are just as a community society, right? Like, I mean, now we're dealing with transgender. Forget about just straight and heterosexual and gay and homosexual. And now we got transgender, and this isn't a consequence or reward kind of deal. This isn't a good or bad kind of position. But in the world right now where everything's being thrown inside of a particular box, there's a good question that says, well, who's going to define my roles? And here's the great part about it, is that you get to define the roles. Listen, I have 3 wonderful kids. Please know that if I meet a young man, the first thing out my mouth is that, listen, sir, in order for you to be complete as a man, you got to get married and have kids. Hell no. And that's part of your plan. That'll be part of your plan. But am I going to say that's what's going to make this other guy a more complete type of man? No, he should be able to define that. And if he doesn't get to a place until he's 67 years old and says, you know what, I want to have kids and be married right now, then that's fine. If that may have been in his head and he was that guy that grew up and he was in high school just with like images of walking down the aisle and walking and being content and happy with a high school sweetheart and making all of that work, and that is completely fine too. But it's not my job to assign the roles. My job is to make sure it's clear for the identity. You know, probably one of the bigger reasons I maybe even have conflict with my wife just around how we work with my son is that she has very clear roles. And again, it's not good or bad, but she has very clear roles. And there's a part of her that in communicating with me, she wants me to reinforce some of those roles for him. And my communication is not about, hey, let me reinforce your roles on being a good boy, on being a nice brother, on being the son. Like, I need you to understand that regardless of whether you're going to operate as a son, the brother, the student, the friend, this is the identity that needs to come out. And if I'm seeing one thing show up in one area, just because it hasn't shown up in other areas doesn't mean that that's not what I'm going to address. You see, I don't care if you could be, for all intents and purposes, labeled a bad student or just not a good student. But I'm curious as to what your identity was in that process. You could be a bad student for several reasons: grades, behavior, attendance. It doesn't matter. That's a lot of reasons you might not be able to fulfill the role of student. But what I am concerned is how well are you fulfilling your own identity? All right, brothers, that's episode 4 in the bag today. I'm going to get this out quick, but I want you all to just keep remembering, okay? Send me your questions. I'm answering them. I'm sending them and responding right back to you guys. And make sure you get some content in here. Get the tools, get the mindset, get the insight. That's right. Get the TMI coming out of the show. Talk to you guys later. Peace.